Just after I was newly ordained a priest, a woman came to chat with me, and she says, I don't belong in this church. I don't feel worthy to be a part of this church. And I said, well, of course you belong. Of course you are worthy to be a part of this church. Why do you say that? She said, I don't believe in all the teachings of the church. So immediately I thought, well, she probably has a problem with one of the moral teachings. In my mind, of course. So I thought I'd ask her, well, what part of the creed don't you believe in? And her response was the resurrection. She believed in reincarnation. Now, I told her that you do belong in this church, because if we as Christians, as Catholic people, truly believed in the resurrection, we would kind of hover over the ground. In other words, we'd kind of float because of this great gift that God gives us. But it's important for us to sort of pay attention to the little ways that in the here and now, how God raises us to new life with God's grace. Now, also on the other hand, the challenge with reincarnation is because of our sinful nature. I mean, we're just going to keep coming back. This is going to be never ending. Probably the best thing you can do is become a dog, because dogs are always welcoming and loving, usually towards others. Now, in the second reading, Paul is emphasizing that Christ has died, Christ has been raised, and Christ appeared to many people. And so he's really driving home the resurrection. And really it's the resurrected Lord that met him and also turned his life around. And Paul at that point was totally unworthy. He was the biggest of sinners, especially towards the early Christian community. He's really persecuting them, and it's God that takes the initiative that comes to Paul and just showers Paul with grace. And so, of course, this experience for Paul will be his motivation for bringing the Christian message to others. Now, in the first reading from the prophet Isaiah, Isaiah also feels unworthy. He's aware of his sinfulness during this vision. And he's not able to respond to the call to this prophetic ministry. But then he experiences God's forgiveness, and he is showered with God's grace. And then, Isaiah is equipped to respond to the call, because he believes that if he can be forgiven, then certainly the people as well can be forgiven. If he can receive God's grace, then others can also receive God's grace. Now, in the gospel reading, Jesus is quite popular at this point in time, and so he needs to use a boat as a platform to teach the people. Now, these fishermen have been out all night; they have caught nothing, and yet Jesus, likely sees the fish and says, "Well, put out into the deep." In other words, take some courage. Do something outside the box for the good of others in the name of your faith. And Peter, of course, is like, well, who are you, a rabbi, teaching me how to fish? But he goes for it. What the heck? But in this experience of this generosity that he receives in this moment, he is overwhelmed by his own unworthiness, his own sinfulness. But once again, God's grace extends to him, and he will be catching people for the kingdom of God. In other words, he'll be gathering people to be aware of God's reign in their lives, to be aware of God's presence in their hearts, so that they also can respond to God. We can always come up with excuses. We can even look at the world and see all the sin and the challenges that go on, and we can sometimes give up. But God will give us the grace to do our part in the world, regardless of what our nature is, and regardless of what we have done in our lives. Every day is a new day. And so as we gather around the table, Lord, we recognize that we're not worthy to receive the body and blood of Christ, but it's God that makes us worthy, because God gives us the grace so that we can be instruments of God's grace to others and extend God's love to everyone that we meet.